So 3 or 4 nights ago, there was an intervention. I was abducted by a reptilian group, and I was brought out onto this pontoon where I was taken up onto a craft. My experience is direct. I'm an abductee, and I've been experiencing the intervention in my life from as early as I can remember. These abductions have involved being taken to craft, facilities, and also there's been military intervention as well, surveillance. And it seems to have affected various other members of my family and people around me with who I've been closely connected with. My first conscious memory is 3 years old, and I remember waking up and I was laying on this table, and there were these grey faces all around me. Big eyes, and they projected this image that they were owls. So to me they looked like owls. But just underneath this I could see the big black eyes. And they were all looking down at me. But I was being wheeled down a corridor, and I remember feeling absolutely terrified. I just couldn't comprehend what was happening to me and why these strange faces had taken me away from my home, away from my parents. There was nothing familiar around me. And I just remember this terror, and it's never ever left me. And then I black out and I remember nothing more from that experience, but that was my very first realisation. So these were the very grey Zeta type people that started my experiences in life. And I was probably around 3-4 years old, and I woke up and my curtains had been opened, and my bedroom was on the second floor, so there was quite a bit of height between the floor and my bedroom window, and there was this grey hovering outside my bedroom window, staring in at me, communicating with me telepathically. And I was like, what? How's this even possible? And the same fear, the same terror, because I think from this very first experience, I was already terrified. The trauma had already been put there. So any subsequent experiences, I was just instant fear when I saw them. But the memory of that happening is etched right there in my mind. So I decided to draw a picture of it. My window was directly in front of me, and the curtains had been opened, and this person was hovering there, and they projected a very non-menacing image of themselves. But I was really afraid, because I knew they could take me away from my home and away from my family, and that was really scary and confusing for me. And I knew I wasn't dreaming, because I woke up and sat up and this was happening. I was conscious.
So has this been happening consistently through your life?
Yeah, quite consistently. There have been times where it's been more prevalent than others. But for the last 27, 28 years, it's been consistent throughout my life. For the last 3 days, it's been, hasn't it, leading up to coming here to give this testimony. We've experienced a lot of intervention. There've been several attempts over the last few days consistently to come and take me, and we just made the decision to just resist it, just completely resist it. We stayed up. Well, Tom, you stayed up all night. The night before we came here, he just refused to go to sleep. He sat vigil outside the bedroom. We recently moved further down the river to a pontoon where we were going to have, you know, electric hookups and better access to water. But actually, we're quite isolated where we are now. And the first night that we had moved, I was abducted. 2 weeks ago was the first in this series of abductions. And we found that their mental influence is a lot closer, and at night they seem to come very close to the boat. And they weren't doing this before. And we think it's because we're in an isolated location that they're able to do this. They feel comfortable. And on that particular night, we just went to bed as usual. I woke up at some point in the night and I knew they were there. It was just this knowing that I just felt, okay, I'm going. They've come to take me. I got the tone in my ear. I saw the lights in the room. And then the paralysis came over me, and I tried to turn to alert Tom and to say something to him, and that's how I knew I was paralysed, because I couldn't move and I couldn't talk. It was just, I just couldn't get it out. And then I don't remember anything more. I blacked out at that point, and the only memory I seem to have of that abduction is being in the craft, flying upwards, vertically, not like a plane, but just going up like this. And I remember seeing the ground underneath me getting smaller and smaller. And I was aware that we were flying over Bristol in the UK, because at Bristol city centre there's this like a Ferris wheel, and we flew over it and I recognised it. I remember looking at an interface screen. There were screens all around me, and I was looking at one screen. My handler, who I recognised, who had come to collect me, was sitting right there talking to me, and I was aware that there were a few others of them around me, maybe 3 or 4 others, several male beings and 1 female, and we communicated telepathically. And I was aware of when they were telepathically talking to each other, because I could sense their minds talking to one another. And this is all I remember about the experience. This person is my handler, and he's been taking me for most of my life. And he wears this black cloak, and he wears the hood over his head, always, when he comes to interact with me, because he doesn't want to be seen. This is what he uses to hide himself. That's also him. That's also the same handler. And I was taken to have an implant put in my arm, which I remember clearly having had, and there's still a scar, slightly, I'm not sure if it's visible on camera, but there's a scar right here, and there's also a lump under my skin. And I have some pictures of when it first went in. There's like some like abrasions on my skin, and that's, it's not really very bothersome, but I do plan to have it removed. As soon as I can find somebody who will do that, I will have it removed.
Could you speak more about any other races that you've come across?
Mm-hmm. I've come across a reptilian type race, and for a while I wasn't aware that's what they were, because they project this image of themselves of having blonde hair and blue eyes and being the perfect looking race, and perfect. But I began seeing, I would see their eyes change in front of me, and they would just start to go from these blue eyes to these kind of goldeny, coppery, lizard-looking eyes. And I started to think, why is this happening? Why do I, in my experiences now, why are they changing? Well, actually, this is common for reptilians to project this, and this is something that they use to for us to be more comfortable with their appearance, so that we won't be afraid of them, so that we will, be more welcoming of them. They really consider themselves superior, and they treat you as such. And they've got a very military approach to their abductions and how they interact with people. I have experienced aggression from them. I've experienced jealousy, and I've experienced sexual assault from them if I haven't been compliant. They don't think twice about using force on somebody to make them compliant and to make them afraid. You know, I was having Zeta abductions and reptilian abductions both at the same time now. And I almost felt like there was competition here, that they were competing. The Greys were my original abductors, so they were, and they still believe that I'm their property, so they were keen to fight for that. I used to ask them why they were doing it, and I used to ask them to stop. I said, I want you to stop taking me. They said, we can't do that. You're our property, we're not going to stop taking you. And psychologically it's had a big impact. I have struggled with depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress, for which I've had to have therapy for. I've had to begin to try and integrate this into my day-to-day life. So the hybridization program is where they're mixing their genetics with ours to create a mixed race person, individuals with, you know, mixed DNA who have the strength and the stamina and who look human, but who have qualities of the visitors. So the mental qualities and also the allegiance, the emotional attachment to them, to the visitors. The most common thing I've experienced is the reproductive side of things. Experiments where they're taking eggs, and I've had experiences where they've implanted fetuses, only to have them removed weeks or months later. Usually during these procedures I'm on some kind of a bed, and my legs are in stirrups, and they do the procedure through sort of in vitro, and it usually involves inserting some kind of a tube or big syringe, and they pass the fetus through into your uterus, and that's where it stays for a few weeks or, you know, a couple of months, and then it's removed. That's usually quite a confusing time because, you know, your body goes through all those changes and sometimes quite a lot of stress, and then it's just taken away. And, you know, as a woman, I start to create a bond with that change, and my mind has to come to terms with the fact that, you know, I was gonna have a baby, but it was taken away suddenly, and the body and the mind has to go through all this. You know, suddenly it's not there, and you have to find a way to cope with this and come to terms with the fact that something's been, you know, something such as so sacred such as life has just been taken away from you. But then, you know, I wonder, was it ever really mine to begin with, if, you know, it was put in there and then removed? I don't know, maybe that's their thought in my mind. You know, they always used to say, you have something of ours, this is ours, we're taking it back now. It's this sense of losing bodily autonomy as well. And their lack of regard for your bodily autonomy. They see me as property. Yeah, when I was around 16, I became conscious on a craft, and I was laying on my back, and my legs again were in these stirrups, and there was a scientist stood right there in front of me, and I couldn't feel any pain, but I was aware that I was in labour, and I was pushing a baby out. And I mean, at that time in my life as a 16-year-old, I had noticed some changes to my body. You know, my belly started to grow for no reason, and they had implanted this baby, and I don't know how long I even carried it for, but it must have been big enough for me to deliver. And I have since had contact with this child. She's at, I don't know how old she is now, but last time I saw her, she was probably around about 5 or 6, and she doesn't look like me. I hadn't had intercourse at the time, and it was just an anomaly. It just started to happen. They had implanted me with the fetus, and I carried a pregnancy for a short time before I delivered. And that was the first child that I remember having around the age of 16. And this was when I was taken to meet hybrid children who I was led to believe are my children. And I was handed a little baby boy. He didn't look human at all. He was quite whiny and unsettled and quite clingy, and he really wanted a fuss made of him. He just wanted to be held and cuddled and given attention. And then there were 2 older children who looked on, and they seemed quite indifferent towards me, but they just looked so sad, really sad in their soul. They just, and it's really stuck with me, this sense of sadness that they have. And I've drawn a picture of them. This is the little boy. In my view, the alien agenda is to create a pacified humanity who will accept their presence here and be a place where they can integrate. They don't necessarily want to take us over or fight with us. They started to instill in me that they had a purpose for me, and that this purpose involved other people. So telling other people that during really difficult times that we were going to face, that I would have to tell them that there were these aliens, that they were here and that they were going to help us, and that I would be one of the people to show these people that they were all right, that we could trust them and that we could go with them if things got bad enough. So that was part of the education, and they said that I would be triggered to do these things at certain points as necessary. As it goes on, they start the mental training, so they give them a cause, and that cause might be planetary how do you say that? Degradation. So depleting resources. They'll show you about big tidal waves and mass fires and all these things that they know are going to happen to the planet already, because they've got the scientific research. They've been studying our planet for quite a while, and they know the state of the planet and what's going to happen. And they use this to give the abductees a sense of purpose for promoting their agenda. So people really value purpose, and they really enjoy being valued by other people. So these are our natural motives that they're using within us, and they're manipulating our strengths as well as our weaknesses. And I think this is how they've been able to get away with some of the abductions, is that they're telling people it's for their own good, or that it's for the betterment of humanity. And this is what pacification really is, taking the strength out of a feisty, strong-spirited race of people, and that's what we are. we're strong and we're feisty. And when we work together, we're really quite mighty. But they don't want us to be that way. They want us to be compliant and malleable. And this is what they're using. This is the pacification program. In the Allies of Humanity book, they go into this a lot deeper with the pacification, and I think it's explained really well in there. When I read that about the pacification, I instantly just linked everything up that I had been through. I linked it right up to that pacification. I thought, oh my God. I knew what I was reading was true because it just laid it all out there, and I recognised my own experience in what I was reading. And that was the biggest evidence of truth about the Allies of Humanity. I found the Steps to Knowledge right after I found the Allies of Humanity, and that seems to have been a turning point for me, finding the steps and just continuing to practice. It gives me a focus outside of what's happening. I've become more resilient since studying the Steps to Knowledge. The abductions haven't stopped, but it's equipped me with the tools to be able to deal with it rather than avoid it, or it's enabled me to really look at it, what it is, and how it's affecting not just my life but how it's working in the world. At one point when they used to come to take me, they used to project an image of an angelic being, and they would say to me, don't be afraid, we're here to take you to a higher realm, to try and calm my fear. And for a while they tried to impart that they were spiritually advanced and that they were here to help humanity advance spiritually. But why would angels and spiritual teachers be taking our genetic material? And why would they be implanting fetuses into people? And why would they be doing this in such a subtle, clandestine way? Why would they be tampering with our minds? Spiritual beings wouldn't do this. Spiritual beings don't fly on spacecrafts. I believe that races can become spiritually advanced, but why would they want to come and influence us to do things for them? Why would they rape people? Why would they abuse children? That's not a spiritual being. That's a being with an agenda. That's a being who's trying to survive in life and committing hideous crimes. That's not a spiritual being. I mean, who has the right to come and take our children and do these things to such young children? Who gave them the right to do that? I mean, that makes me feel angry. They have no right. That's a crime. And I think we need to take great discernment here when we decide what a spiritual being is and what spiritual contact is. There's a quote in The Allies of Humanity by Marshall Vian Somers, and it says that, and I really like it, and it says that our freedom is at stake and the freedom of our world is at stake. And I think that this represents a huge threat to humanity. I think they seek to influence us or use us as some kind of a workforce or resource base, but they can't necessarily live here themselves. So they have to find a way to create their own people who can walk among us down here and who can interact with us, but who still have complete compliance with their agenda and what they want for humanity and what they want, how they can coerce us to be a subservient and obedient culture of people. I mean, we're at a point in our evolution where we're looking for other life. We're wondering if there's other life out there. So we're already asking the questions, but how are we going to feel about the truth, about actually knowing? Can we accept what we're going to face? You know, that could be really, really confusing and tumultuous for a time. But it's here, it's what's happening, and we have to face it. That there is life in the universe, and it's visiting us already. I was abducted by a reptilian group, and I was brought out onto this pontoon where I was taken up onto a craft. After this night, there was further interference from a second intervening group, and we began 3 nights of resistance to make sure that no further abductions happened. So the 3rd night, we definitely knew that they had come back. However, we decided to just go to sleep, and we tied the rope around our legs, and we said a prayer and we went to sleep. During the night, there was an intrusion. I felt somebody come into the room and start tugging at me, trying to put their hands under the covers and underneath my body, and I felt this tremendous pressure on my chest and my torso, and I couldn't move. I was completely paralysed. I was able to fight them off. I used a few invocations. I used Nasi Novari Karam, which is really effective, and I just repeat this in my mind over and over, and I don't know how it works, but it does. I'm not sure if they're going to be back tonight. They're here for reproductive purposes. Basically, I'm at that point in my cycle where they might be able to implant a fetus, and that's really what we're trying to avoid. I don't want to be involved in their reproductive program. You know, I'm just tired of this. I'm sick to the back teeth of this, and I'm at the point where I will do anything just to stop this from happening, just to live a normal life and have a family on my terms. So before I go to sleep at night, I surround and protect myself with the love and the grace of God. I always pray before bed, and I set this mental intention to protect myself. I use the diamond. You can develop ways to shield yourself. I use this to reinforce like this just solid get out type thing. And then I breathe into here and I root myself in here whilst mentally maintaining the diamond. And that seems to keep them out from a distance. Physically, I have a rope that me and my partner tie to our legs, so we're attached to each other, so that should I be attempted to be taken during the night, this rope will tug on our legs, so that it will either wake me or it will wake Tom, and we'll become alert to an abduction happening. Yeah, and also on our side we've got spontaneity. We can be really spontaneous, and they've not got a protocol for spontaneity. When I was a little girl, I used to feel this presence of a woman with me, and I felt like she was protecting me. And this presence has never changed throughout my life. I still always feel this presence with me, and I feel safe with it. I think I find it comforting because there have been times in my life when I feel like there have been no witnesses to what I've been through. And to know that there has been a witness, a spiritual witness, has been a real source of comfort. And I remember there was a time in my life, which I do want to share actually, when I was in such a deep depression. I was questioning whether I could really keep going, and part of this was feelings of being alone and not being able to see a way out of what was going on with these abductions, not being able to stop it. I suddenly felt this need to get up and write something down, and I felt something moving me, some kind of, I don't know, just some kind of inspiration, and I wrote, "What is seen by the unseen cannot be unseen, for we are all seeing." And I felt like that was a communication, and that stuck with me. I've never forgotten it. I felt that was the teachers. And I think they do communicate when we really need to hear it, when we need to be moved, and when we need to be given courage. Because that's what's going to help you get through. There's going to be times when you want to give up. It's going to get really confusing. But there is healing, and there is hope. And there is justice. There is justice.